Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, we're going to be talking about freedom, and specifically about what it means to be in the world but not of it, right? What does it mean to not just conceptually grasp this idea, but to literally experience the abundance of this numinous aspect of life, right? Not just a life force energy, not just feeling revitalized or renewed, but being tapped into a source greater than yourself, and how that actually feels, right? How can we put that into words with regards to the experience? What does it mean? What does it mean to live life before coming into this abundance, right? Because once you do, you are essentially a bright light in this world, right? Which we're going to talk about. So I just hope that you're doing well today. I hope that you're encouraged by the message, and I hope that it gets the wheels turning for you and gives you a little bit of perspective. So, I want to open this by saying, we've talked a lot, especially recently on my channel, about sanity, about the health of your mind, right? Because if you don't have your mind in good shape and good health, what do you have, right? That's so important. It's kind of like without our mind, we're nothing, and I feel like understanding how our minds work, and therefore how to nourish our minds and to protect our minds should absolutely be taught in school, just as a fundamental part of the core curriculum, what they call that, right? So some examples would be like, hypothetically, if this was taught in schools, it would be how to identify dangers or threats to our sanity, right? To that equilibrium. And as well as the normal stages of psychological development, which this in itself is sort of exemplified when you study the customs and traditions of like tribal communities and how they honor the different stages of a person's development. You know what I mean? It's like they have these ceremonies that the youth within that tribe look forward to, and they understand that there's so much symbolism in these ceremonies, and they're basically implemented as like this holy stage that a person reaches, that it's to be, like I said, it's to be honored, it's to be revered, and we don't, that's something that I feel like we've really lost in modern society, and I think it's created this incredible disadvantage for all of us, really, because it's kind of like without having those fundamental understandings, we have people just kind of growing up. I liken it to feeling our way through the dark, and we never reach a certain level of maturity, right? Psychological maturity, spiritual maturity, that never even we never get there. And so we're just becoming adults, but as far as spiritual and psychological maturity, we're still like children. And so you have kids raising kids. You hear people talking about that a lot, right? But there's more to it, I feel like, and I think that it affects a lot more of us than what we realize. So but just imagine if we had not lost touch with those beautiful customs that, like I said, used to be a part of, and maybe they still are in certain parts of the world, but different, cultures and tribes where, these important aspects of the human experience and the different stages were preserved in stories and myths, in ceremonies and symbolism. It was preserved and passed on generation to generation to prepare the youth of that tribe or culture for what's to come, to help their young minds develop properly, right? To prepare them. So, there's verses in the Bible that talk about, how the youth the younger generations suffer, right, because of it. So anyway, I'm very passionate about that. But yeah, I mean, just imagine if our school systems literally, as part of that core curriculum, just taught that, how to identify dangers or threats to our psyche, and as well as the normal stages of development, psychological development, what to expect, what to look forward to, what to strive for, what to place as a priority, in your learning and throughout your life, what to safeguard, right? But the problem is, in the established system, we're taught what to think instead of how to think, right? So we grow up and we get out in the real world, and it's like we're a fish out of water. You know what I mean? It's like, and I say that because of this. It's like, I mentioned we were taught what to think and not how to think, and in the real world, you need to know how to think. That's part of how to operate. You know what I mean? It's like we're released out into this real world, right, as an adult, when we graduate or whatnot, and it's like we're just given this, all these years of data points. I don't know how you're supposed to say that, data, but you're just given this set of these data points, right, to operate with. And it's like, so we just have to go and just do and just use what we have and just readjust along the way as we go, right? And when something evokes one of those data points, that's logged in our mind from our schooling, then it's like we can recall it and implement it for that particular moment in time, and that's it. That's it. There's nothing further, because we weren't taught how to do critical thinking. You see what I'm saying? That's the extent of our training. So it's like we hit this psychological wall or barrier, and then we're just, again, having to feel our way through the dark, right? So in light of this, I feel like it's a situation that's that collectively we have normalized, right? Not individually per se, depending on the person, but collectively we've accepted it, we've normalized it, or whatever. As far as, being a child, within our psyches, okay? Or with regards to our psyches. And then, so I want to rope in this verse from the Bible. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. It says, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." Okay? So, in other words, we have to look at this from a perspective that's like more than the surface level, okay? So it's really weird. It's like, I don't know if you've ever gone exploring a lot when you were younger. I did a little bit, but you'll find these old abandoned buildings, and sometimes they have a plaque that explains supposedly what it was all about or whatnot. You have to kind of question the accuracy. I always like to consider fact something that I literally firsthand observed with my own eyes and ears, right? So, but some things it's long gone in history, and you really, all you can go on is the evidence you have or whatever. But my point is, with these old abandoned buildings, a lot of them are what they used to call insane asylums, right? And that is just more of a pronounced, intense label as opposed to a mental hospital or institution, because the treatments themselves were more amplified, literally, electrically. They would give people shock treatments. And I don't know if they still do that today. I'm pretty sure they, at some point in history, deemed that to be, too much, possibly even inhumane. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the history to that degree. But I know that they used to use shock treatments. And what's interesting about this, and I wrote down Wizard of Oz Part 2. Yeah, that was a really wild movie. I really liked that as a kid, actually. The second Wizard of Oz, where she escapes from, in the very beginning of the movie. She's about to be given a shock treatment, but she runs away from that. But that's all literal with those places like that in history. But what's interesting is, if you take that concept of a shock treatment, right, literal, and you flip it over to the mental part, not physical but mental, then you can understand that, okay, well, this actually makes sense because trauma shocks us as well, right? Our psyche. And it's literally like a reset of our minds, you know. And if you've been through this, I know you understand what I'm talking about. But you know, for a lot of us, that's the prompting that happens in our life. That's the point in our lives where we are reborn, okay? And when we are reborn, in some ways, we are a child again. You must return, or you must become as a child, you know, again, to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Or the kingdom of God. So in some ways, we're a child again. And specifically with regards to understanding this new world, because it's a whole new world, okay? But it's the spiritual realm. It's like this other dimension layered on top of the physical, okay? The lower vibrational, however, whatever lens you want to apply to it, the physical. It's like now you've been birthed into this new spiritual realm as a child, so it's all new to you, right? But as far as how you're changed in the lower level physical realm, which you're also a part of, still, now you're a part of both realms or dimensions, see? But as far as how you've changed over here, now you're grown. That's how I view it. Now you're spiritually grown. I don't, you know, of course you can talk about being grown as far as just physically and over a particular period of time or whatever. I get that, but from the spiritual lens, this is how I see this. So over here you're grown, but now over here you're a baby, okay? And it goes with so many things throughout history, you know, hymns and songs and stories and myth and fairy tale and folklore and everything. You know, like for example, you know, the song when it says, I once was blind, but now I see. Okay, so here's the thing. When this happens to you, when you're refreshed in this way, you might say, or reset rather, from the shock of it all, when you try to come at your friends and family with these new data points, okay, they don't compute with your friends and family's operating systems because they haven't been updated to the spiritual realm. On the flip side, you may find that you suddenly connect with particular family members that you really weren't that close to before because maybe they've already entered that other realm that you haven't until just now, and suddenly you can connect with that person all of a sudden. Because we're all, here's another saying for you, we're all at different points on the path. We're all walking each other home, right? It's the same concept, but it's a real experience. It sounds like a bunch of, you know, hot air or just stuff, made up stuff to someone who hasn't experienced it. But when you've experienced it, that's when you get these sayings, because it's so hard to put into words. How can you capture this experience? It's the best we can do is to, like Jesus gave parables. The only thing we can do to explain to a physical world the spiritual side is to give examples that are understood in symbolism in the physical realm. You see what I'm saying? Like, I remember myself, you know, when I was younger, before I had, you know, woken up, you might say, and I tried to read all these particular books or whatever, and they just didn't make sense. I would kind of get this, you know, somewhat of a base level intellectual understanding and grasp it at that level, but that's it. That's the extent. It wasn't understood. Again, there's all the getting of the wisdom, but it wasn't brought down into this deeper level where you understand and process and get it and it clicks. You see what I'm saying? But yeah, there's you know, this crossroads of putting off, what they call putting off the old man. So I like to research a lot of different things, you know, with regards to this, you know, spiritual element of this reality and psychology and just things like energy and electricity and just the mechanics of our reality and all this stuff. So I was looking up, electricity in our atmosphere, and this was really interesting. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it was. I found a little blurb on amber, the substance, literal substance. There's something to do with amber. You can research it if you have interest, where you can rub two pieces together and it generates, I don't know, it gets some ions moving or something, and there's some type of energy or electricity generated there. Pretty interesting. And crystals, particular crystals, can kind of serve like a battery. So interesting. But anyway, I'm reminded of that. I think it's the 311 song, where it says, amber is the color of your energy. It's a really cool song. I like it. Kind of chill. But in my research of that, just kind of, brushing the surface, I was reminded of, Satan being called the prince of the air, the power of the air. And then, how it talks about, it relates God to breath, giving us life via breath. And that's air as well. And again, I was looking up, electricity in the atmosphere. And so that was really interesting, tying all that together, just kind of in my mind as I was reading different things. But my point is, there's just just innumerable beautiful mysteries to be curious about, right? But I want to share with you, here's my point. When I was just kind of looking this stuff up online, I ran across this article that had a title that caught my attention. And when I clicked on it and I read further, I thought this is a perfect example to highlight what I want to say today, okay? So this is an example of how subtly things can reinforce paradigms riddled with error. Our paradigms riddled with error when we're unaware of it, okay? So the title of this article was, Scientists Have Found a Way of Making Electricity from the Air. So my first thought in reading that was, should it say making electricity, or should it say harnessing electricity? I don't know enough, but just kind of caught my attention, right? So I clicked on it, and then down in the article, it just kind of switched out that word making with harnessing. And herein lies the issue. Those two words are not synonymous. To make something implies that it doesn't exist prior. Maybe there's particular elements that exist, and you have to bring those together to form something, right? But if you are being credited with making it, then that kind of implies that it can't be made without you doing it, without the force of you doing it. And yet, to harness something means to take something in its complete form and to be able to take that and then put it to use, right? It's already done. It's already meshed together or whatever. And you just kind of take it and put it to use. So I see that as two totally different things. And so, they're not synonymous. So, yeah, we can drive ourselves crazy picking everything apart, right? Obviously. But here's my point. When your eyes have been opened, you can't not see these things. Or you might say you can't unsee what you've seen. You're literally operating now in this same physical world, but you have a new set of eyes. I once was blind, but now I see. It's a whole new set of eyes. You can't help it. You just have this new level. It's clicked. Things have clicked like a switch that's been flipped in your mind, or the veil has been torn. That's a spiritual saying. So it's like you're changed forever in that way. So because of that, the world will be different forevermore when your eyes are opened. So now you see what you used to normalize as weird and strange. Okay, and you'll never come back around to seeing it in the old way that you used to ever again. It just is what it is. So if you're at that place, and this feels relevant for you and it resonates with you, I'm just, it can kind of feel lonely depending on the people that are currently in your life, that you are part of your social circles or whatever. If you're new, if this shock therapy that happened via trauma has happened, fairly recently in the last few years, you're still probably trying to get your bearings. It takes a while. Think about a child, how long it takes them to walk, even like depth perception, how they're bonking their heads everywhere, stuff like this. So it takes you a while, literally, to get your bearings. It's understandable, but it can feel lonely in the process, so it's comforting to me to find others that I resonate with now at this stage of my life, and I'm just hoping to offer that for you as well and give you some insights, right? So so there's this concept of enmeshment in psychology, but we're not gonna go too deep into it. We're gonna look at it kind of different. So I looked up to enmesh on the Merriam-Webster dictionary online, which means to catch or entangle in, or as if in meshes, to be in meshes. So I looked up the noun of mesh, which means fabric, a web-like pattern or construction. And then the verb to mesh means to cause, this is interesting, to cause to resemble network, a network, okay, or the network. Or to cause to engage, to cause to engage. Okay, so the verb of mesh, to cause to resemble network or to cause to engage. And then I looked up the term to cause, which is to compel by command, authority, or force. Okay, this has manipulation written all over it, which is interesting. So I looked at the term compel, to cause to do or occur by overwhelming pressure. Okay, so these are all tactics that you go through when your mind is being manipulated from a controlling person, right? The pressure, the force that's applied to you, it's so uncomfortable. You're compelled. They impose their commands and demands on you, right? So if we think again through the lens of there being one great truth and only these, various variations of different corrupted aspects or ways to look at the one truth, right? The false replications. Think of this. So Satan's pride is what compelled him to replicate or attempt to replicate the power of God, but it's a false power. It's not true. He will always fall short in that regard, right? So to cause or compel is right there hand in hand with manipulation. So the example above with Satan, I said that his pride is what compelled him to replicate the power of God, right? Because he was jealous, his greed. And he thought he was important enough, so there comes the pride in, to be able to do that, or, that he should do that, right? So we can learn from this if we personify, well, not really personify, but if we just look at the symbolism here, okay, in this one aspect of this greater story. And I'm not saying it's not true, but just to learn from, okay? If we look at this in that way as a parable, how does this apply to our life? Then we can understand that sin can be what compels us sometimes, right? Sin can be our puppet master. It's like a natural law that can manifest in different ways. I mean, even the moon affects the tide. There's a force there. There's a cause and effect. So in that regard, there's this force that causes. There's the aspect of manipulation, which when you come out of being manipulated, I feel like we think it's all bad. It's all bad. And we just, just start running hard and fast as we can in the other direction for freedom, right? But it's, and it feels great. It feels great. But that's where, we can trip our own selves up if we're not careful. So, in that regard, in that light, we might say, what if manipulation or cause and effect, or this force that makes things happen, it can be benevolent or malevolent, right? So, my point is, it can feel safe to avoid anything that compels us at all, in our quest for total freedom, right? So let me share Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. So I feel like a lot of times people view Christ as giving up your freedom, like being bound to religion. And there is, I believe, a great difference in religion and spirituality here too. There's the established religion, see, and then there's spirituality, which I feel like is a personal thing. But when you're running, for your freedom, it's about kind of coming back, calming down, and finding that balance again, for your own well-being. So, to be free, going back to the verb of mesh, to mesh is to cause to resemble the network or a network. When you want to be free, when you value freedom, to me it equates to not resembling the network, not being enmeshed. Okay? So in that way, you can understand through just a different lens where it says in the Bible to be in the world but not of it, which is finding our way that we should have been given, that was owed to us, this wisdom that was not cherished and revered by our ancestors for whatever reason. I'm not blaming them, it's just the system. But eventually we get to that place of understanding how to think and valuing that more than what to think, okay? So the goal here is to retain our individuality. And I feel like this is where sometimes we're swayed against that. This malevolent force that's trying to rope us in to resemble the network, right? To be of the world, by trying to say that if you're trying to be your own unique individual person, well, that just means you have a huge ego. You're just that's bad, right? But the thing is, it's almost like the concept of the ego feels synonymous with independence. But the reality is, people who have a really large ego, or people who are heavily enmeshed in ego, are actually very dependent and not independent. See, this is where everything gets flip-flopped so subtly, and we don't catch it, see. But again, I'm sure you probably can think of examples, maybe even different stages in your own life, or people or whatever, where, again, somebody who's just got a huge ego, they truly are very dependent on worldly validation, right? And I think that we all begin here, literally, as little kids. They need that. They need that to establish a working ego to get started in life, right? But in the spirit, when you're reborn and all, it's like we get to enjoy benefits of a collective. So it's like a network. Let me explain, okay? And it's one of those things where you have to experience it to believe it, right? Through my lens, at least. But this new network, right? Because it's kind of like when you get away from this initial network that really just seeks to suck you dry and exploit you collectively and with some individuals that you come across, right? When you run away from that, it's like the concept of being a part of something else is just a turn off big time. But this new network is a divine network. It's a collective spiritually. And the way I see all this, right, like how it works is like this. It's like again a paradox. It's like true freedom is a thing in this divine network, because how it works is in your individuality, you are like one unique part, unique, but you're still a part of a greater whole. And this is illustrated in how the Bible explains how we're all given different gifts. We're meant to be unique, right? We're not meant to be manipulated to be the same, right? You know, your personal experience, you might relate this to feeling like you were you were persuaded to try and be an extension of this narcissist or this toxic person, you know. But then if you zoom out and you see the whole collective of modern society, you can kind of understand that too, how creepy and scary it is looking at where they're going with, you know, artificial intelligence and stuff. It's just pretty wild. Probably under the umbrella of convenience, you know, things like that, but still. So the Bible supports this. It's a paradox. It's freedom, but yet you're still a part of this collective, this divine network. It's both. It's a both and, right? You were given the rights to retain your own individuality, and they're honored, right? They're not dismissed and invalidated and shamed, and there's not any greed seeking to take that from you or competition or any. See, that's the corrupted part of how a network works here in this realm. Okay, but again, if it's one truth, then you have the fake network that's all just deeply entrenched in sin and bad motives that really crushes your soul. And then over here you have the network that is supporting. It's very supportive, right? Your individuality is supported, in fact, but you're all kind of working together towards this one goal, right, spiritually. So let me share this saying from Voltaire. It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere. The chains they revere. So there has to be this shift in your mindset, right? Because when you go through this stuff and you've had this shift happen to you, almost, it wasn't like you really had anything to do with it. It's just kind of like, just like when you're born, you didn't have anything to do with that, as far as you know. You just happened to you. You know, you were just born. Same thing when you're born in the spiritual realm. As it happened to you, you have to find your bearings, right? So Matthew chapter 8 verse 22 says, "Follow me and let the dead bury their dead." So the world will try to use your humility and your conscience against you, okay, as you're elevating, right, in your mind and psychologically and spiritually. They're going to try, the world collectively, right? The fallen world will try and use your humility and your conscience against you and make you feel like you're edging up on getting prideful or arrogant. You know, that your light is too bright. But here's the thing. Again, God has a response to that. Okay? Matthew chapter 5 verse 14 says, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid." Okay? You can't help it. There's now this spiritual abundance within you that's a part of who you are. It's just a part of who you are, period. And so I just want you to be on the lookout, you know, in this new realm that you're operating in now. Just please, as a part of protecting yourself, your psyche, your mind, your heart, your spirit, just be on the lookout for any kind of shaming tactics to try and rope you back over here and bind you once again to these chains of the fallen world, okay? Whether it's on a personal scale in a relationship or the larger scale, just be on the lookout. Because here's the thing. You don't have to defend yourself. Okay? You're not held to, you shouldn't be held to those same standards over here. It's not even like the same. Okay? When you're truly walking in the light, there's no explanation needed. Because others that are also walking in the light will know you. They will recognize you. And that's said too in the Bible. But it's it's put like, after death, like in heaven, that we will know one another. I'll have to find the verse. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description. But it's said in the Bible, like afterwards, after you die, in heaven, you will know your loved ones. Well, spiritually, if you look at that as a parable or symbolism through that lens, you might say it's the same here when you die to the, the old man or your old ways or the physical world, fallen world, and you become reborn, to this new awareness. So you're reborn spiritually, okay? And your psyche's operating that way now. Then those who are also in this new place with you will know you. You will know one another and recognize one another, okay? Which I think is just another layer of understanding that verse that says, a tree is known by the fruit it bears. So, and the thing is, if you came from a dysfunctional family dynamic, then it probably took you a very long time to see this quality in you, right, outside of yourself, because it's almost like we need a mirror for that purpose sometimes. Like we can't even see our own light inside until it's reflected back. It's just an interesting concept. But ultimately, the reborn you is numinous. There's this numinous aspect, or what, some people might call mystical. And so that's important because, again, it's different. It can't be measured and understood from this set of research tools. It's not quantifiable, and because of that, people will try and totally discredit you. Your perspectives, your new perspectives, they're going to try and totally discredit you. So expect it and let it just roll off like water off a duck's back. It's pretty cool one somebody gave me. You know what I'm saying? I just encourage you to do that. Okay? So, essentially, be encouraged, because this new numinous aspect of you is essentially like magic. It's like representative. It's going to be possibly ridiculed or slandered or exploited, or you're going to have all these new obstacles pop up and all this stuff that you're going to have to deal with. But just rest in the fact that you aren't alone. You are now part of this new divine network, and you're going to start seeing it too in beautiful synchronicities and things like that, right? Which will just reaffirm, what you already know in your bones. So just be encouraged. You are now a part of the magic of this reality, right? The magical layer of it. And in that regard, you might think of us as being hidden, right? When you remember the verse that says we are in the world, but not of it. So I hope that this was inspiring and encouraging. I hope it got the wheels turning for you, and I just hope that you enjoyed it. And I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I will see you again very soon.